Welcome to the Solid Verbal. The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo-woo!
And now, Dan and Ty.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the bonus Only Heauxmers Allowed, which we of course named after this.
But you let in Homer Glumplet.
It says no Heauxmers. We're allowed to have one.
Oh, I felt so left out.
And today, as you already know, because you've looked at the name of the episode, you've downloaded or are streaming this episode, we are talking about LSU. And we're not just talking about LSU because the Alabama game is tomorrow, I guess, depending on when you're actually listening to this. If you're listening to this in like mid-January, congratulations. I appreciate your patience and just savoring this like a nice old bottle of wine. But for everybody else, this isn't really about the Alabama game. This is just about, 9 weeks into the season. We stand here with LSU at 7-1 with some pretty big, if not unexpected wins. I think 7 of the 8 teams that they've beaten are FBS teams with winning records, which is a pretty crazy accomplishment. Not that LSU can necessarily control how good their opponents are, but they can definitely control which side of the win and loss column they end up at the end of 60 minutes. And LSU certainly has done a very good job of that for a number of reasons, which we are now going to get into with Sports Illustrated's Ross Dellenger, who of course has covered LSU for many, many years and is now on sort of a national beat for SI, but still incredibly connected and insightful with all things LSU. So he was sort of a no-brainer to have on to talk about the Tigers. So as we get into that momentarily, just a friendly reminder, you can follow us on Twitter. It's just Solid Verbal. Facebook, Instagram is always a good time. Join our Pick'em pool if that's something you're into. And you can check out our store as we're going to be releasing some new shirts here very soon. I know we've said that many times. I swear we do mean it. And you will know and you will find out if you follow us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. We will alert you to that. We've done a couple of these Homer shows a couple weeks ago with Jeff Schwartz of a number of different places, but including the Action Network and some radio appearances as a host. He hosts radio. That's good for Jeff because he's really good at it. And last week, Mike Golick Jr. with Ty talking about all things Notre Dame and a little bit of caffeine. Did a great job. Love Mike Golick Jr. as well. We're going to break our offensive line streak, our former offensive lineman streak here, though, with Ross Dellenger, who still is in Baton Rouge and does a great job, and excited to talk to him. So why don't we just go into that? And with that, we are now joined by Sports Illustrated's Ross Dellenger. I'm sorry, I only read your name. I don't know how to pronounce it if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Is that right?
You did. You got it right.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's a relief. Who obviously covered LSU for a long time down in Baton Rouge, but is now covering all sorts of stories around college football for Sports Illustrated, but still based in Baton Rouge. So I figured, you know what? This is a great option. This is somebody who probably has a lot of thoughts and a lot of insight. So I will start right here with LSU's, I think, surprise season to some. Are you surprised by LSU's success thus far this season?
Yeah, I am. I probably wasn't quite as down on them as some others were, but I did not certainly expect them to be 7-1 right now. The games against Florida, Auburn, Georgia, and Miami, those 4 games, I didn't expect them to go 3-1 in those games. At best, I was thinking they would go 2-1 in those games and be sitting here at 6-2. And really got Mississippi State too. I mean, they were supposed to be a really good team in the season, so you throw them in. And so, yeah, I did not expect them to be 7-1. Probably at best 6-2, and I would have probably my pick would have been something like 5-3 right now. So I didn't expect them to be this strong. And I think the real big difference, as crazy as it sounds, is a kicker. They got a Division II kicker transfer to come in. I think LSU missed the most field goals of any program in the nation last year. They missed 11, and they got a kicker to come in, a transfer kicker. And as Ed Orgeron says, when they get past the 35-yard line, they know they have 3 points, and he's been incredible, and he's really helped them tremendously in pretty much every game. You can look. He made 4 field goals in one game, 5 in the other. He made the game-winning kick against Auburn. He's been incredible, and they've always had a good defense with Dave Aranda. And when you throw a kicker in an offense that is a little more versatile than it's been in the past, so it's throwing some different things out there, you get a team that's pretty good.
On that note, how did the Cole Tracy thing happen? Not that LSU was out scouring the sort of grad transfer market in any sort of shady way, but what was there a connection? Was there, enthusiasm from Cole Tracy and his camp, I guess, to get into a high level program? You don't see that specific kind of jump all that often.
No, it actually goes back to Los Angeles. Cole Tracy is from out in California, and LSU special teams coordinator, who had been in the NFL for years, had kind of put out feelers that they were looking for a grad transfer. He put out some feelers to scouts and NFL scouts and other assistant coaches. And someone, I'm missing his name, but he's a special teams coordinator, I believe, at Iowa State, and he played at USC, and he actually played under Orgeron, I believe, in the late '90s, the Pete Carroll era, and so there was that little connection there. He knew of Cole Tracy from California, told LSU, reached out or whatnot to Assumption College and Cole Tracy, the Division II school up in Massachusetts, and boom, he ends up arriving at LSU within a few months of being contacted, and he was a grad transfer, so he plays immediately, and he has 1 year of eligibility, and yeah, he's been incredible for him. I think he's missed 2 or 3 field goals. I don't know exactly his numbers. He's around 20 or 22 makes, something like that. I mean, it's been pretty incredible. Set an LSU record, made 5 field goals in a game earlier this year. I think it was against Mississippi State. It's just been he's been incredible. It really has.
All right, we'll stay on the topic of grad transfers, obviously, because a huge story was Joe Burrow's arrival and performance thus far, as they've won a lot of games. What would you say, is there a consensus about Joe Burrow's season thus far with, amongst the people whose eyeballs are most trained on him, coaches, fans, anybody in general? Is there a general feeling of like, he's not the most consistent guy, but he's definitely a timely guy and he's ours? Is there any sense like that?
Well, I think, what LSU wanted in a quarterback is somebody that they've had in the past. As crazy as that sounds, they want somebody who just manages the game well, doesn't make mistakes. They know they have some pretty good skilled players around Joe, and they always have a solid running game, even though they didn't return a big running back. So they just kind of needed that guy with that so-called, moxie and that leadership skill and that ability to make plays with his feet a little bit and not turn the ball over. And Joe has checked all of those boxes, specifically the leadership kind of moxie box. And his numbers aren't great, and they don't, LSU, because its defense is so good and its running game is always so strong, they don't really need the numbers to be great. I think deeper into Ed Orgeron's tenure here, 2-3 years from now, I think he would like a quarterback that can make a little more plays and have a little more passing game. But right now, this is suiting them. And Joe hasn't made a lot of turnovers, but more so, he's really kind of won the team. And he's, with his leadership and just his ability to be that gritty kind of player who, in key situations, makes plays. So his stats aren't great, but in key situations, he makes plays, and he's got that kind of leadership ability. And again, across the ball from him, the defense is so strong that he doesn't need to go out and be crazy. And he's got a great kicker that they feel comfortable when they cross that 35-yard line that they have at least 3 points. So all that kind of helps him be the player that he is.
So you mentioned in 2-3 years, because Burrow will be back next year, has another year of eligibility. In 2-3 years, Coach O and the offensive staff imagine or picture or have, a vision for what perhaps the quarterback of the future looks like for LSU, or the system, the scheme of the future looks like for LSU? Are we in a 1.0 of this offense with, the transition from Matt Canada to Steve Ensminger? And if so, what is that grand vision? Does this offense look appreciably different in 2 or 3 years with time?
Well, it's weird because when Ed Orgeron took over, he preached of having, a balanced offense with a passing threat that LSU hadn't had in a few years. He kind of wanted that. He wanted more of a spread offense. They are slowly making their way toward that spread scheme. And you can see, and actually Nick Saban talked about it earlier this week. He said, this is unlike any LSU team we've ever faced. They don't just run the ball over and over again. It was kind of I'm sure he didn't mean it, but it was kind of a slap in the face of Les Miles. But, but it is. LSU is slowly getting there where they're starting to spread the ball out a little more. They're starting to spread the field a little more. We're seeing 4 or 5 receiver sets. We're seeing some spread concepts that Les didn't run a whole lot. And even Ed Orgeron and them didn't run a whole lot last year. Or even during his interim season. So we're seeing them slowly get toward, transitioning the offense from more of an archaic I formation, run heavy, to this kind of spread deal. And it's just going to take time. That's the thing. It's like switching a defense from a 4-3 to a 3-4, which LSU did also the last few years. It takes 2 or 3 years to get there, to get the personnel. And I think we're slowly seeing that start. As far as the quarterback, a lot of the offense too will be dictated on the quarterback and what they're recruiting for, who they get in the next few years. So still a lot remains to be seen, but you can tell this offense, and what Saban said was really telling earlier this week, and that this is a much different offense. They use a lot of different formations. They spread you out a little more.
You mentioned the defensive shift from a 4-3 to 3-4, of course, under Dave Aranda when he was hired under previous regime. And Ed Orgeron was tasked with helping to execute Dave Aranda's vision and is now Dave Aranda's boss, retaining Aranda, who's obviously done a much more powerful job, a really good job than anything else. What is the dynamic like, going from an assistant and having Ed Orgeron be one of his assistants to now being his boss? What is that interpersonal situation like between Coach O and Dave Aranda?
Man, that's a great question for Dave Aranda. If only we were able to talk to him every now and then. As most SEC schools shut off their assistants, LSU does so as well. But, Dave, I've covered the team long enough where I know that Dave and Ed's relationship has always been pretty dang good. They have been, and really the relationship Dave has with a lot of people is really good. Dave is a kind of very laid back, chill guy, very kind of quiet, cerebral approach to everything. And so he's kind of the yin to Ed Orgeron's yang. I mean, Ed is loud, screaming, motivational. So they're kind of the opposite, and in a lot of ways, I think that's a good thing. And they have, I think they have the marriage between those two has been really solid. And it speaks to how important Dave Aranda is to this football program when you look back at January and what happened. Texas A&M came in and tried to poach Dave and threw out a lot of money, and LSU threw out more or just as much. And Dave is now the highest paid defensive coordinator in the nation, $2.5 million a year. So he basically got $1 million raise out of out of A&M's interest. And for LSU to do that, to really pony up like that, should tell you all you need to know about, one, Dave and Ed's relationship, and two, how important school leaders think, including Ed Orgeron, think Dave Aranda, how important Dave Aranda is to this place. They knew they couldn't lose him.
In terms of, and this is more of the micro, in terms of development, which, I guess, position group and really coach, assistant to you, has stood out in its improvement and success, really, 9 weeks in?
Well, Jerry Sullivan was hired over the offseason. He's an long time receivers coach in the NFL. And he really, people around here kind of rave about him. He was a consultant last year, and they promoted him to, it's kind of like the passing game coordinator / receivers coach. And, you know, and I don't necessarily know if I could tell this from just watching video and games and things like that, but you just hear about people talk around the program about his influence on the receivers. And you do see a couple of receivers, you know, like Justin Jefferson, LSU's leading receiver. I mean, he was a three-star kid that barely qualified, joined the team late a couple of years ago. And he's now, you know, leading LSU. He's the go-to kind of guy. And for Jerry to kind of have molded him has been really impressive. So, you know, I mean, he's probably been one of the more impressive assistants. And then you got to look at Steve Ensminger too. You know, he hadn't been a full-time offensive coordinator in almost 20 years, really. And Ed Orgeron gave him this chance in his home state. Both Ed and Steve they're pretty close, and they're both from Louisiana. And he gave him this chance, and you know, he's been doing a solid guy. I mean, they're not lighting up the scoreboard, but they're doing just enough.
If you were to look through your mentions on a Saturday, and really, why would you? But if you were to dip into that feed, where do you sense the typical LSU fan is most excited and most disappointed with this team? And it's hard to be too disappointed, granted, with the record and the teams that they've beaten. But where's the excitement? Where's the disappointment?
Well, right now, given the Devin White situation, they're most disappointed with the SEC offense.
Yep.
So, but you know, as far as just the team, you know, well, first of all, they have completely rallied behind the new quarterback Joe Burrow and the new kicker Cole Tracy. They know those two players have been essential to this run, and so I think, you know, there's a lot of my mentions flooded with comments about those, you know, good comments about those two players. Where I think there could be a struggle is the same spot in a lot of ways that has been a struggle here at times, and has just been kind of a lightning rod throughout college football. Every fan base is the offensive line, and
right.
And you see that here. I mean, that's the offensive line is criticized pretty heavily. They've gone through a lot of injuries here. I think they've played, I want to say, started 4 or 5 different sets of offensive line in this 8 games this year. So it's been kind of a maligned group. So I would probably point to that, you know, as maybe a weakness somewhat that LSU fans kind of jump on the team for.
Fair. And I think it was you who did this. Maybe you had retweeted or something, but looking at the recent signees at quarterback and what became of them over these last few years, because LSU has sort of infamously, and this isn't necessarily unique to the Tigers, but there's been a lot of washout at quarterback, just as it's become a very difficult position to evaluate and develop. Does the future look brighter with some continuity with Joe Burrow for a couple of years? That they're not going to rely on anybody particularly young. What does, I guess, the longer term future at quarterback look like? And is there reason for optimism?
Well, you know, behind Joe is Miles Brennan. He's a sophomore, very highly rated sophomore from the Mississippi coast that many people thought would probably be the starter this year before Joe came in. And so I think there's still some hope there that Miles can, after Joe leaves, take over. I think the issue is, you know, if Miles wasn't ready this year and they had to bring in Joe, what does that say about Miles? So there's maybe some concern there. Beyond that, it looks actually not great because you lost to Justin McMillan in oh gosh, his name is escaping me, but 2 scholarship quarterbacks transferred this summer. So LSU's only got 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the team right now. It's Joe and it's Miles, and man, it's so you're in a pickle. You need to sign some quarterbacks. So that is all eyes are kind of on the recruiting trail. I mean, Ed Orgeron is got to get himself stocked up there at the quarterback position. We all know that's a position that attrition is always an issue, and it has been for LSU, and it's come back this summer when those two players left. So not that they were going to play a whole lot, but they still added depth, and the thing is LSU's offense is constantly changing, and they haven't really set on one thing. And Steve Ensminger's future, he's a little older. You got to wonder how long he's going to go. So I'm not sure if they even know exactly what direction they want to go in the future with the quarterback. And so that's an issue, and that's something that that is certainly being watched is what LSU is going to do in the future at quarterback. A position here, as you mentioned, it's just always maligned, it seems like.
Do you get the sense that because there seems to be more consistency, more job security for Ed Orgeron, this far into the season, performing like LSU has thus far, then certainly where LSU was last year, the beginning of this year, the tail end of Les Miles' tenure, where rumors sort of dogged him for the last 2-3 years about his job security. Do you get the feeling that recruits are more confident in a more stable LSU moving forward?
Well, I would think so. I haven't talked to any necessarily, but I would think that they would see that there is a more of a stable foundation. LSU lost. I just did a story on a bunch of recruits that LSU has lost to Alabama over the years, and how that a lot of times results in this 7-game losing streak against the Tide. And one of them was this past year, Patrick Surtain, the cornerback from Florida. And I remember his dad going on record saying that his son basically chose the more stable coach in Nick Saban instead of Ed Orgeron, where everybody thought that Patrick Surtain was going to come to LSU. He'd been leaning that way for 2 years or more, and he went to Alabama, and and I think it was all because of the coach's stability. So they do lose recruits because of that, and I think that prospects should probably start seeing, especially given what's happened the first 8 games of this year, that things are a little more stable around here than maybe they thought.
So LSU currently has more, and I looked it up. I did the research. They currently have more out-of-state commits than Louisiana commits. Is that a result of a conscious focus shift from the coaches and Coach O, or is that sort of by chance? Because that hasn't always been, or generally isn't the case when you look at these last few classes.
Right. Yeah. We actually did like a real big deep dive on the last 10 years in LSU recruiting, and they usually get about 55 to 60% of their signing classes are from Louisiana, and so they do go out of state more than you might think. Now for them to have more out of staters than Louisianians, I'll have to go back and look, but that's rarely happened, and I wonder if down the stretch here that won't even back out and they'll get a few late Louisiana. But
sure,
the thing about Ed Orgeron is they're going to go out and while they want to lock down the state and all that, they're going to go out and get the best players, and they've made a focus on East Texas, and LSU's focused there for a while. Houston is a huge hub for them. The Dallas area, all that area. They almost view it as in Louisiana, and Houston especially. That's LSU's biggest alumni, grouping outside of Louisiana is in Houston. So they go there a lot, and they want to spread the brand. I think Ed wants to spread the brand, and maybe you're seeing that a little bit with the outside kind of recruits. He's getting out and spreading the brand a little bit.
Obviously, this can change on a dime, and this is my last question, but has Coach O won over this fan base that is, like any other fan base, pretty much always impossible to please?
Yeah, especially down here. Les Miles won the national championship in 2007, and LSU went, I think, 8-5 the next year in 2008, and literally there were people who wanted him to be fired. I mean, it's crazy here. So even a national championship here can't quite save you. But you got to at least try. you got to at least get there. And I don't think Ed's going to win over this fan base until he at least reaches that point where he's playing for a championship, whether that be the SEC or the national championship. And at that point, then the next step, you have to win it, and until those things happen, I don't think he's quite won over anybody. And honestly, beating Alabama is huge. And it's something that, cost his predecessor his job, Les Miles. And Ed was hired to win championships, and to win championships, you got to beat Alabama. So it's a big game. And I think Ed could certainly win over a little bit of portion of the fan base if the Tigers were to win Saturday.
Okay, and here's my actual final question, because I always like to finish on food because I'm a dork and that's just how I live. You are in Baton Rouge. The game of the century of the millennium is being played in a couple days as we record this on Thursday. But people will be coming in, not just Alabama fans, not just LSU fans of just big college football atmospheres. Where should they eat in Baton Rouge?
Oh, there's just so many great places. There really are. I mean, South Louisiana, it's hard to pick one, but
sure.
A few Alabama reporters are coming in. I'm taking them, and I always take outside reporters who come in to one place, and it's called Pa Rand's. It's a restaurant on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, and it's just very kind of the quintessential Louisiana fare in kind of a Louisiana setting. They have all the Gulf seafood, fresh fish, and the raw oysters and the barbecued kind of oysters. And so it's a great place. And so I would recommend the one, when you're in Louisiana, you want to eat true South Louisiana food in that setting. And that's a good one.
I just Googled it as you were describing it, and I want nothing more than to go there. That's PARRAIN''S. Looks like there's good outdoor area.
Yep.
Holy hell, that looks good. Ross Dellenger, thank you very much for your time. Everybody follow Ross on Twitter if you aren't doing so already. What's wrong with you? Read his stuff on SI.com for Sports Illustrated. Ross, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll have to have you on again.
All right. Thank you.
So there it is. There it was. Ross Dellenger of SI. Let us know which team we should do a Only Heauxmers Allowed show about moving forward as we head into the stretch run of the season. A lot of interesting stories and developments about damn near every team in college football. So let us know who we should hit next with our Only Heauxmers Allowed series. I really enjoy doing them because I think I speak for Ty here as well. We don't have time to deep dive teams, on these preview and recap shows just because there's so much action to get into. And also we have to talk about Ty almost becoming a weatherman as often as possible and I think we're going to have his forecasts for games. So we're already trying to squeeze in a good amount here. So we will keep doing these Only Heauxmers Allowed shows because we want to. And it seems like you like them, at least if you like the team we're talking about on that show. So thanks again for listening. We are going to be obviously here every Wednesday and Sunday throughout the season, and hopefully keep these shows dropping on Friday morning. So for Ty, who was not on this show because he definitely has a day job that's very secret, and for Ross Dellenger, thank you very much for listening. This is Dan, so stay solid and peace.